record. And with that, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Going Pro Cycle 2 for FY24 Going Pro Talent Fund info session. We're going to start off with just a little bit about business services at Northwest Michigan Works. We are the administrative agency and your direct connection to the Going Pro Talent Fund application. So we'll go over some of that and then dive right into Going Pro Talent Fund details. If you have been on this call before or have attended one of our in-person sessions, with you, we have new things that come up every time. So you won't be just hearing the same old stuff. All right. So who we are. Okay, so our teams that are connected to this and helping you at any given time, we have 4 business services representatives, 3 apprenticeship specialists. Then we have support specialists for each of those divisions. So there's about 8 to 10 people working with you at any given time. Those individuals have expertise on apprenticeships and or the Going Pro Talent Fund. So you have lots of eyes that are helping you. And we cover the 10-county area. So if you're up in Petoskey or down in Wexford County, we've got you covered. So that's who we are. And what we do specifically, I'm going to move this right over here so I can see. Our services fall into 3 buckets: hiring, training, and connections. So you'll see at Networks Northwest, and we're a program of that, Northwest Michigan Works, that business services can mean a lot of different things. We can help you with talent recruitment services, such as the Pure Michigan Talent Connect. We help with screening for your potential people. So if you need us to help with resume screening, we can certainly do that. Referral of qualified candidates. We have caseloads at the Michigan Works Centers that our individual job seeker side of the house is doing for us. So they have qualified candidates that we can refer to you for your jobs. All the more reason to get in contact with us with the talent shortage, right? So the second bucket, training, that's where the Going Pro Talent Fund kind of falls under, but we can do incentives for new hires as well, just like the Going Pro Talent Fund, but there's a separate pot of money that we like to use and call OJT. So if you're hiring somebody that doesn't have every skill that you were looking for, but you're willing to take a chance, you've met them, they seem to fit in culturally, they seem to exhibit, all those soft skills that you're looking for all the time, but they just don't have every skill. We're willing to help you by reimbursing you some of that wages up front. So it's a reimbursement, but the first part of their job, all that training that you're doing, we can help reimburse. So that's something that you might want to get in contact with us for. Connections, obviously with our in-house connections, whether it's, you see on this slide, Apex accelerators, doing work with the government, any level, local to feds, apprenticeships, the Business Resource Network in Charlevoix and Emmett County right now. That's where we've got that. We've got 2 openings. So if you're in Charlevoix or Emmett County and want to talk about that is a program that employers pay into, but we have somebody that will help you with retention. That is their job, help you with retention of your current employees. So make sure you reach out if you need some help there. And then even the Global Trade Alliance. But I just didn't know that we also do international trade here at Northwest Michigan Works. So if you are at all doing that work overseas or even just across the border to Canada, we can help with that. So just let us know. We have connections there too. Okay, so what actual services? We talked about a little bit of this already, so I'll just kind of hit the highlights. The hiring, the job posting, the job fairs, employer of the day. If you want a private job fair where you're sitting in our center and you need to, you want to get the foot traffic, and then even our caseloads where we know you're coming, so we'll make sure that the people that we're working with that are appropriate to refer to you are being referred. So that could be a great recruiting opportunity for everyone. And then training, I already talked about OJTs. We have incumbent worker training. This is a specialized pot of money to avoid layoffs. So if you're in that kind of a situation, maybe just talk to your BSR and we might have some options for you there. Customized training, and then of course, what we're here for today, the Going Pro Talent Fund. Connections you can see include a lot of different people. I talked about most of them, but if you're looking for economic development, if you're looking to expand, we've got connections to the state. Obviously, there's local EDOs as well that want to help you. And if you're not connected to them already, we can get you there. So, and then we do find that employers recently in the last few years that I've been in this position are always looking to expand their outreach to the pipeline. So we have connections to the schools as well as other networks that are looking to help bolster that. So make sure you come to the one stop here, Michigan Works. All right, so while we're here, the Going Pro Talent Fund, let's get into some details. And at any time, you guys can raise your hand or interrupt me with questions. I don't mind. We'll leave time at the end, of course, for that. But if it's there and you want to put it in the chat, I'll ask Kyle if he would. Kyle, if you would, just interrupt me if there's anything in the chat that we need to answer, okay? So the purpose. Really, and we'll send this PowerPoint to each one of you at a later date. So I'm not going to read this to you. You can read it for yourself. But the purpose here is to make sure that you're making sure that you're training new or existing employees to better their skill set. So things that like we talk about all the time are the need for the training. Sure, does it end in a certificate? And then there's a couple of other things that we'll talk about in later slides. But if you're in need to upskill your current or new employees, that is the purpose of this grant. And of course, there's a bunch of caveats, and this, even though this grant is really easy to use, there are some popular things that it doesn't cover. So, but we will go over that with you. State program statistics. So as you can see, 2014 is when we started. We're now in 2024, 10 years of this program. We skipped a year during COVID. So technically there's 9 years there that we're pulling data from. So the total number of awards over 7,000, that's an amazing number to me. This is across the state. And so average award amount across the state is just shy of $40,000. In our area, and we'll get to that slide too, but in our area, it is, anything from a $1,500, even less than that award to 120, 160, right in there is where we find ourselves with some of the training plans we're doing recently. So just so you know that. Average training cost per person. So you can get up to $2,000 for somebody that's new to your program or an incumbent that's taken a class for a certificate. Or if they're an apprentice, you can get up to $3,500. But the average training cost per person has, been historically lower than that at $1,385 for the state. So total amount funded, just a paltry $276 million across those 10 years. So that's a lot of money to be investing in training for the people across the state. So that's huge. And total number of employees trained, 199,000. And that probably was just under or over, because that's usually how I do my slides. But that's real close to how many employees are being trained. That's huge. So cycle 1. So we're in cycle 2 right now, or about to be on April 22nd is when the award window opens up, or the application window opens up. But so how do we do in cycle 1? Well, the state awarded just shy of $44 million last cycle. So that was huge. 809 awards, 8,262 individuals. These are new hires across the state, along with almost 19,000 current employees trained. And then within that number, 3,600 U.S. DOL registered apprenticeships were trained. Kyle's going to be mad. I forgot to take out first year because they're not all first years. So 3,600 USDOL registered apprenticeships trained last cycle. Award amount, average award amount, 54,000. So we're seeing kind of an uptick in that average award amount for lots of different reasons, not least of which is now we can reimburse a little bit more money. So average cost per trainee, that's 1618, creeping up there. That's good. Some good trainings out there. So we identify them, you guys put them on your training plans, and we try to get that reimbursed for you throughout the year.
Rob, we had a quick question
Yes.
related to these slides. Is the OJT targeted groups incumbent training all part of the award, quote unquote, award amount, or the above quote training awarded amount?
Okay. I don't know if
I think what they're referring to is all the different training included in the awarded amounts from the statistics.
yes. Yeah,
And
so
then
the OJT is, and the incumbent training is part of that award amount. The targeted groups, actually, I don't know if if we're talking about those incentives for those targeted groups, I think it's in that final number as well, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Tiffany, I hope that answered that question. Nope. My apologies. Okay, so how about talking about just our region? For cycle one, we were awarded 1.585 million in this area. So that's great. 42 out of our 56 applications were awarded. So that's a good track record, especially when we put ourselves up against the rest of the state. 150 individuals hired and trained. So those are our new hires that we are identifying and projecting out that we would hire, that you would get reimbursed for. 751 current employees. That's a good number. It's actually, I'm going to try to remember here, so grain of salt with this. That's a little bit down from previous years, but I think overall our numbers are still they're growing at a steady pace when it comes to this grant. So it's just depending on how many people are coming out and applying for it. So, and 169 registered apprentices. So that's a huge number for our area. And it's only growing. Our apprenticeship team, it seems like they grow every day. So we're getting more and more people back to that registered apprenticeship model, which is a really great training model. And one that can get you reimbursed a little bit more with this grant. So award amount, the average award amount, 3,800 or 38,000, pretty good. Average cost per trainee is 1,760. So I like these numbers for us. I think they're going to go up as we get more people educated in this area about how this program can help. All right. So how are you deemed an eligible employer? Well, you have to have a need for skill enhancement. So when we're looking to work with you, those are the questions that we're asking. What is the training that you're looking at and what you're needing? It might be something that you're doing anyway. Like you've already said, I need this training for these people in our organization this year. That's great. It might be that you talk to us and you're like, ooh, I got more ideas. So that would be great as well. We include the apprenticeship program in that. So if you have an apprenticeship program, and I've spoken to this in most of the other meetings that or info sessions that we've done, I'm thinking exactly half or maybe one more than half of our awards last year had apprenticeships in them. So you'll see later on the point value that you get for having apprenticeships is not a small amount. It makes or breaks some applications. So you have to have a physical presence in Michigan. You can be a non-government private entity, or you have to be a non-government private entity, but you can be a for-profit or a nonprofit in that role. And we had both for-profit and nonprofits be awarded through the years. You got to be compliant in all state tax obligations. The reason we put this here is because if you're awarded based on points, they will ask you, the state will then ask another department in the state, Department of Treasury, if you are all set with your tax obligations. If you are not, then they will tell us, and we will tell you that you need to fix that. We'll give you a phone number, and we don't know what it is, and you will have to make that phone call. And once it's cleared up, you have 60 days to do that. When after the award is announced, when you do that, then you tell us that you're all clear, ready to go, and then we will tell the state that runs this program, and they will check, and then they will say, all right, they're good. And then the award is no longer pending. You have that award. If it isn't cleared up in 60 days, they will rescind that award. And you have to be willing to participate under the program's eligibility parameters and guidelines. Just a little legal speak, but gotta be able to participate. Not eligible to apply. You guys can obviously read this list, but some of the people that we've had contact with or communicated with in the past are county road commissions. The tribes, unfortunately, are not allowed to do this. And local school districts and intermediate school districts have come to this table, but we cannot do that either. Unions cannot apply, but they can be training providers, just so everybody knows that. Okay. All right. So we know which employers are eligible. What about trainees? What does it mean to be an eligible trainee? Well, for every eligible employee, current or new, must meet all of these criteria. They have to be permanent full-time. And what that means to this program is 32 hours a week. And so you can't be a seasonal where you're 16 hours in the winters and you're working 80 hours in the summers. That won't work. Now, if you were 30 hours this week and 42 that week, and you're getting really close, that's an exception that I can make. But for the most part, you need to have full-time employees coming through this, not seasonal or part-time. And again, that 32-hour per week is the standard. They need to work primarily in Michigan, and for whom the employer pays all applicable taxes to the state of Michigan, 18 years or older, and they need to be a U.S. citizen or legally authorized to work in the U.S. So that's your eligible trainees. For the new hires, in order to be considered a new hire, you have to be hired 30 days prior to, on, or after the effective award date. So the effective award date we are positing because things change, but we're targeting July 1st. Kyle, always correct me if I'm wrong. July 1st for this. So if you hired them June 15th, they could be considered a new hire. And that's just different paperwork that we're asking you to get basically for them, as opposed to somebody that's on your staff already. They must be hired, trained, and retained for 90 days to get your full reimbursement. So in practice, you're hiring them, you're telling us that they're going to be trained for 100 hours. And then after that 100 hours is up, if they're retained for 90 days, you'll get full reimbursement for that. If they're hired and retained for only 60 days, and they are let go for whatever reason, you did train them for those 60 days, so you could get reimbursed to that 60-day mark. And then there's also a 30-day mark. So just so you know that about new hires. Okay, so new hire OJT training. So this is specifically for that projection. You're telling the BSR and you're putting on your training plan that you're going to say, I know that during this time period, I'm going to hire 10 new people. So that's what this is talking about. Really, we want their training to be conducted at the work site. So that's why we call it OJT, on the job training. So we're going to reimburse you for that training at the work site. Reimbursable training begins on or after the affected award date. So if that's July 1st, they could have been hired July 1st or June 15th. We want to, that reimbursable training begins on that July 1st. New employees must be hired. We just talked about this 30 days prior to or on after the effective award date. And then this bit about the USDO registered apprenticeships. The 90-day retention begins upon the completion of training. It must be completed within 1 year of the date of the award. And cycle, well, I guess December 31st is not the right data for that, but the 1 year, so July 1st, so it'd be June 30th for this particular grant period. In order to receive full reimbursement for the OJT portion of that apprenticeship training, it kind of has to follow the same rules as those new hires. So, and I might be confusing people because I'm talking about two different pieces here. So that is something that we can definitely go over in person and make sure that everybody understands exactly what we're talking about when we say that. Okay, so most people want to skip right to this. This is great. The process. How do I do this? How do I get my application in so that I can get this award money? Well, you're going to start with the authorization request. And there's the link right there, and we'll get that to you. The BSRs have it. They probably have it memorized so that they can get it to you. That authorization request will hit both Kyle and myself. And really what we're going to be looking for in that is you're going to give some basic company information just so we know that you're the real deal. We're not about letting people apply that aren't going to take it seriously, that kind of, or that are not actually a real employer, those things. Once we see that authorization request, we will either already have your training plan, or we're going to ask you to fill out the training plan. And you'll see an example of it here in the next few slides. But that training plan, once we have it in our hand, then we will approve the authorization request. Because we know your plan, we know that you're serious about this, we're going to move to the next step. That next step is then filling out the actual application, and we have the link to that. It's the same system as your authorization request, so it'll be real easy to move right over to that. So once that authorization request is approved and the training plan is in our hands, you get to do the actual application. Our team, the BSRs and or the apprenticeship specialists, are able to help with this. So if you need that extra person sitting right next to you, we'll come to you. If you want to do it virtually, we'll help you out virtually. If you want us to take the lead, we'll take the lead. Whatever you want as an employer that's working through this application, Northwest Michigan Works is there to support you. Once you get your application done, you're going to let us know, and we're going to make sure we're going to do the assessment of the final application. We're going to make sure you got all the points that you can get. We're big on making sure that you get as many points because that's how you get awarded. So we'll take a look at that, and we might strategize with you. Okay, how could we get 1 or 2 more points on this to make you even more that much more successful? Once we have that conversation and we're all good, we submit the application. You guys submit the application to us, and the business services team has a couple things that they're going to do. So we have a couple days past May 10th. Remember, you're turning in, and I haven't said it yet. So you're turning in, the application window ends May 10th. Starts April 22nd, ends May 10th, and it ends at 4:59. I say 4:59 because if you turn it in at 5, it won't go through. 4:59. I don't think we had a problem with that, but I think somebody in the state did. So just so we're good. And most of your BSRs are probably going to actually talk you into turning it in sooner than that, so that there's no way that can happen. But just so you know. So you're going to submit it to us. We're going to do our thing. If we see anything else, like maybe we missed for some reason, we have the ability to send that back to you. So you can really quick change something, and then you can send it back to us after that change. And then we submit it to the state, to LEO, the Labor and Economic Opportunity Division. And once that happens, then we wait. We wait to see if it's approved or denied. We're going to say approval, of course, but even then, it takes some time. And if you have a tax obligation, that's the time that we're going to figure that out, right as you're getting your approval for that award. So we'll look for you to resolve that if necessary. If that's all good, then you will receive from us a hearty congratulations, as well as the Going Pro Talent Fund Award Agreement. which just outlines exactly what your training plan is and what we would need from you. And that means documentation, certificates when your people complete their training, invoices to prove that you paid for it, those kinds of things. So it'll outline everything. But again, talk to your BSR and they will know exactly what you need to turn in. We're with you every step of the way. Just kind of a little repeat, how to get started, that authorization request, remember that you're developing that training plan. It's required before you move on to the application. You fill out that application. We're taking a look at all the point categories and strategizing how to get the best application in. Things to remember. I'm going to beat this one to death, apparently. The training plan requirement, make sure you fill that out and get it to us. Training allowances. I kept this here. This was holdover from a couple presentations ago. HR classes are not reimbursable unless they are part of an HR apprenticeship. So if you're looking to help your HR individual with some classes and some training, if they are a part of an apprenticeship program, this grant can help reimburse for that. If they are not part of an apprenticeship, this grant cannot help pay for that. Median wage requirement, there's a point category on here to see if you meet that wage requirement. It is $18.97 in our area at this point. They take a look at that on a yearly basis. So that could go up or down. Scoring criteria, we'll go over that. Impact story. The impact story for this grant is so vital. And for impact stories, you can take 3 minutes to fill this out, or you can take 3 days to fill this out. That's going to be up to you, knowing that if you take your time and tell a good story, that is going to make its way to the state level legislature, and it's going to make it to the federal level. And that's how we get more money for this program, is by telling great success stories and impact stories. So the impact story is a requirement. So you will have to fill that out before you get your reimbursement. Like I said, it could take 3 minutes or it could take 3 days. Depends on how much time you want to be able to, or can spend on that. So we're not bothered either way, but just so you know, the legislatures, they eat that stuff up. Partners involved in your application. So sometimes like you're doing some training with the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center, for instance. Great partner to have. If you're doing that, they will likely get a copy of your application. The reason we do this is because sometimes you're putting trainings on your application, but you don't have time, or you think as an employer, I'll get to that, right? Like, I know I want to do that training, but their training calendar fills up really quickly. So on your training plan in practice, and we've seen this happen, you've got a great training plan. It includes MMTC, and they can't fit you in when you thought that you would be able to do the training. And so all of a sudden you've got this money earmarked for something that you cannot do anymore. So that partnership in particular is the one that I see in our region that would need to see a copy of that. And they might reach out to you when it comes to that. We at Michigan Works have a great relationship with them. So they can ask us, hey, who is thinking about doing that? We'll let them know. And if it's somebody they've never heard of, they'll get in contact with you just to make sure that that's still the case, that you still want to do that. Or if they already have a relationship with you, they can just reach out that way too. All right, so reimbursement takes place after all training is complete. We get this question a lot. So that's how this program works. Once you do all your training, and then you give us the proof of that training and the certificates and some payroll documentation if they're new hires, all of that stuff is required before we send that check out. So that is when our BSRs and our business services specialist, Kyle Ray, will be in contact with you. And once you get all of those things, and we need an invoice and a W-9, those things as well, then that reimbursement can take place. Mentioned it already, but it's worth saying again. Reimbursement rates are now $2,000 for current trainees or newly hired. up to 3,500 for apprentices. And we will work with you on getting the upper amount when we can. It's up to, so if your training only costs $1,500, then you either send them to another training that costs 500 or more to get that 2,000, or you just get that 1,500 reimbursed. Either way, reimbursement again takes place after all training is complete. I promised a sample of the training plan. Here it is. So this training plan is going to help you outline and kind of put on paper, not really, on the computer, what you're actually going to be doing. So you got the course name that you want. You've got is it a certificate? Is it OJT for those new hires? Or is it college credit, for instance? And then the cost per person over here. And then it'll ask about trainees. Probably two years now, we have seen where we're really trying to make it easy. Leo's trying to make it really easy for you as an employer to fill out the application. So the application does not ask for trainees' names. They just ask for how many, the number of. But it is 100% easier if we see the whole plan and we've got the trainees and we see those people. So that is a requirement for us locally. You just won't have to repeat that requirement when you put it into the application online. So for the trainees, we're going to need to know if they're a current or new or an apprentice. You're going to need to know their name or job title, because new hires, you don't know their names yet. So you can just put in, operator. That would work. And then their hourly wage. The wage information is, again, vital. We're going to be asking for that at 3 different points. We're going to be asking for that at the beginning of training, directly at the end of training, and then 6 months post your reimbursement. So we're going to be asking for at those 3 points that, and then you'll see on here, it's an autofill. All the course names that you put over here are going to be autofilling over here on that training plan. But that's it. Nothing to be scared of on that training plan. Just to outline the median wage again, $18.97 for the Northwest Lower Peninsula. When that changes, we will let you know. So the scoring criteria. So how do you get points? Well, you get points for being a high priority sector. And you can see a giant list of them here. Infrastructure is the newest one that's on there. It was new either last cycle or the cycle before. But most people are going to fit in these. We definitely have applicants that don't fit in this. If you don't get these points, it's not a deal breaker, don't worry. But most people can fit into those. Then the application includes training directly applicable to infrastructure or electric vehicles or mobility. You can see kind of the governor's agenda in here a little bit with the electric vehicles and the infrastructure. So if you have training that's applicable to those, you get another point, I believe. So that's another point value there. Application includes training in partnership with a community college, a university, or a third party trainer. There's a new tiered point system for this. So we've been using it for a couple cycles here, but if you're a community college, if your trainer is a community college, you might get the top level of points. If they're a university or a third party, you might get a different level of points. If they're not one of those, and there are lots of different training vendors out there that fit these and some that don't. But if you don't fit any of those points will not be received. And we'll help you with that. We know the definitions when it comes to third party and who's really university, because there's online stuff versus in-person stuff too. So special allowance for labor market participation policies of the employer. So you get points. You have to fit the definition of these, and your BSR is going to have that, and they'll know that. But if you do predictive scheduling, if your actions to reduce transportation and barriers to employment and training, if you do that as an employer and you can prove that you do those things, you can get points for that. And improved access to affordable, reliable childcare as well. And then diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there's an allowance for minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, individual with a disability-owned and controlled. Or if you're geographically disadvantaged, you can score some points here. And there is a special note because in the beginning, you had to be 51% owned to like the example I always put up is, okay, so you and three people own this and the shares aren't even. So if you're 51% owner and you're a woman, you get these points. The note here is if you're only owned by two people, then if it's a husband and wife ownership and they both own 50%, then that would count for those points where it didn't previously. The geographically disadvantaged, the BSRs, and the whole business services team have maps that we follow. We just simply punch in your address for where your business is located, and then if it falls within one of those DE&I locations, the geographically disadvantaged, then you get those points as well. Application includes USDO registered apprentices. So if you have apprentices, you will receive points. Now, we have to make sure that they're USDOL registered, as opposed to, some people ask this question, as opposed to a state registered apprentice. There is a difference. So we have to make sure that they're registered with the USDOL. And then we have to verify that as well. So we'll be asking to make sure that those apprentices are in the system. We'll be asking for some information about them. The hourly median wage of trainees is equal to or above the regional median wage of $18.97. You get points if you're at or above. So we'll walk you through that. Pretty simple one there. The size of the amount of funding is a tiered point system. So if you're asking for a whole lot, you'll get less points. If you're asking for a little bit, you'll get more points. And here it is. So this is the scoring criteria. It says draft, but this is it. This is it. So that high priority sector, if you're in one of those, you get 10. Like I said, it's not a deal breaker if you don't get that, as long as you can fit all these other requirements. So if your training directly, if your training is applicable to infrastructure, EV, or mobility, you get a point. The application includes a partnership with a community college, university or third party. You can get up to 8. Like I said, that's a tiered system. Special allowance for labor market participation, you can get up to 3. So I think that's a point for each one of those things that we just discussed in the previous slides. DE&I, 4 points. Notable because it was more points in the previous iterations, but this year we're going to get 4 points for that. Up to 7, depending on how many registered apprentices you have. So that's a tiered point system as well. Good to note that. That hourly median wage, they're really pushing that. So that's where a lot of points come from. So if you can make that one, that's a really good one to have. Size of the amount of funding requested. Like I said, if it's under 60 or up to 60,000, you get the most points. It's 6 points for that. If you're asking for more than 220,001, you're going to get 0 points for that. Just a little bit on the impact story. These are the questions that will be asked, the background, what positive impact on the trainees that you saw as an employer, the benefit to you, what is that? Does it increase profitability like I asked? Are you able to bring on more people and train them up to do new products? Maybe, bring in a whole new line. They want to hear all of that. Testimony of personal statements from the trainees or the employer. So these last 2 are optional, but they really make a big difference. I can tell you from personal experience, working with employers that were able to do this, it really helped out. Additional feedback. If you want to give additional feedback, like you don't like this point total, or you think of another one that could be a good option for everybody, they are reactive, so they will listen. To that point, they have changed how this program has been put out to the public quite a few times. And I think that's great because they're responding to what we say. And they're also responding to what the employers are telling them. My team has to learn new things every time because of that. But that's something that we're totally willing to do. So just so you know, the feedback that you give is taken very seriously in this grant. So modification allowances. So you'll be talking to us if you need to change anything. And we know that business happens, right? You can't take somebody off the floor. You're too busy and they can't get to their training. So that training has passed and you couldn't do it. So we know those kinds of things happen. So course changes, equivalent to the originally approved training or a different training provider offering the same or equivalent course, you can do that. So if that person misses that training and there's another one that's similar, that you could put them through a little bit later when you're a little slower, you can do that as long as we know that that's what's happening. So you're just having that conversation with us. Course date changes, if a vendor says, we didn't have enough people for this class, we have to change the date. We can do those things as well. It is important to note that extensions past the original 12-month period are not allowed. So if you were to get it in July, we can't push it beyond that year. It's just not allowed anymore. Transfer of funds between current employees and new employees or new hires in either direction is allowed. This really helps us, and I'm sure Kyle is smiling right now because that is one of the things. Taking that example of your employee that you couldn't take off the floor to go to training because you're just too busy. If you didn't already allow for new hires and that training passes and nobody could go to it, you could sub in a new hire for that. And if you hired them in the correct amount of time and they were retained for that 90 days within the year, we could get you some reimbursement that way. So that's just kind of a great way to, if business does happen, we can help change and modify so that you can get that as close to that full award as you can. US DOL registered apprenticeships cannot be replaced with non-apprentice trainees. So if you called for 4 apprentices and for whatever reason, 2 of them left or 2 of them didn't get to the training done, we can't replace them with non-apprentices. That can't happen. So we would need to rescind those funds if you couldn't replace them with other apprentices. Replacing a course that would negatively impact the original scoring is not allowed. So this comes up sometimes when you put a course on there. Let's say your accounting team needed to take accounting 202 at a local college and they couldn't do it. Well, if nobody else can take that college credit course because you got a point or points for that, we can't, that could negatively impact the score if you don't use it. So we can't replace it with a non-credit class is basically what happens there. So you would have to replace the person in that accounting 202 class or rescind those funds. Changes to employer information, we got you covered there. If we misspelled something or something to that effect, or if my fat fingers put in a wrong number, we'll change it for you really quickly. And modifications that increase the total cost of training to exceed the original award amount are not eligible for approval or reimbursement. So if the training that you need to be changed is more than the original amount, we cannot go over that original amount. If you're going to go ahead with that training anyway, we'll just reimburse the original amount and then you pay the difference. That's okay. But we can't go over that original amount. Okay, so what's the process again? Well, authorization request leads to the training plan being in our hand. Once that is there, we will approve that authorization request. Then you start the application. You're looking at those point totals and trying to get as many as you can on the application. We're finalizing that and submitting it to us at the MWA. We're going to go over it, ask some questions, maybe send it back if we need to for rework, and then we're going to get it in the final submission to the state. Then we're going to wait for that approval or denial, and you're staying in contact with the BSR about training so reimbursement can happen as soon as possible. So you're just, I used to say, we're going to be your best friend. We're gonna hit you with a couple emails here and there, just seeing where you're at with it. We have the dates that we know that you should be done with it. So if we haven't heard from you, we might ping you that way. But we might be very interested in just seeing how you're doing as BSR. We do a lot more than just this grant. So we'll probably ask you, you know, are your hiring needs taken care of? Do I need to put an ad out on the Pure Michigan Talent Connect for you? Do I need to give you some labor market information? Those kinds of things. So we'll be there for you when you need us. Because I like this slide so much, I put it in here twice. So this is the process again. Again, this PowerPoint will be sent to you guys that have joined today. But there's the process again from authorization request all the way to that award agreement. That's our goal. So employer expectations for this grant. If you haven't gathered by now, like being actively involved with us, you know, designing the training plan and just going back and forth with us, that's an expectation. Realistic goals and expectations. One of the, you know, this kind of speaks directly to a couple things, but the one that I see the most is $2,000. You can get reimbursed $2,000 for each new hire that you do. You're like, okay, I'm going to hire 50 people then. That's a lot of money that I can get reimbursed for the training that I do. That's great. Well, immediately my BSR is going to come to you. They're trained to do this and they're going to be nice about it, but they're going to say, hold on a second. Are you actually going to hire those 50? Because if you're not, that's training dollars out there that you're not going to be using that now nobody can use because they're allocated to you. Let's be realistic about this. How many have you hired for the past 4 years? How many, what's that number? And if you tell us 10, then we're probably going to say, well, let's back off on the 50 and maybe go 15. You know, maybe it's a banner year for you because who knows? But the state they haven't changed any rules yet, but they have talked to us about that exact thing where there's like a large amount of new hires that the employers are not hitting the goal that they set for themselves. So that's where that realistic goals and expectation come from. Pay wages to employees that are equal to or greater than the prevailing wage of the local market. Okay, so that prevailing wage, that's just the speak for that 1897. They want to see those good wages in the area, but we know what prevailing wages are in Northwest Michigan. So if you come to us and you're asking for labor market information, and you're paying $14 an hour, everybody else, and I mean everybody else is paying 16 or 18. We're going to let you know that. But that prevailing wage, I would not be worried about that. But a good wage for the area. And we know in our 10 counties that number could be quite a range. So we're not worried about that one, but it's in here anyway. Provide training data via the training plan document. So make sure that we have all that information, name, wage, title that they have. Sign and return the Going Pro Talent Fund agreement. So when we send that to you, it's just an agreement that this is what you said you're going to do, and these are the things that we would need to reimburse you for. So that's the agreement. Provide at least one impact story. We say at least one. We might come to you during the year. Your story might be incredible. You might be doing this great training that helped, 6 of your people do, some great stuff. And these people were second chance employees per chance. And that's a great story. So we would do something local with that or want to. It's up to you. But at least that one impact story is required. Commit to retain employees at the completion of training. So that's just, you telling us, yeah, of course, we're gonna keep these individuals, and then if, they're not the right fit, then they're not the right fit. Provide wage information prior to training, post-training, and 6 months post-training. Those are those 3 wage check-ins that I spoke about earlier. Provide required documentation for reimbursement. There's a couple different tracks. If you're a new hire, there's different paperwork versus an incumbent worker versus an apprenticeship. So you will know exactly what you need to give us. We will definitely outline that, 1 in the agreement, 2 in phone calls and emails that we have back and forth. That will be something that's really easy for you to do. Provide projected employer contribution. So, and OJT training is not to be included in this, but that projected employer contribution is something that you're going to put on the application. So when you are doing the application, it's going to ask you to kind of project above what you're going to be reimbursed, how much money you're spending to train these individuals. And those can be like, we can't reimburse you for the plane ticket out to California for this person to do that training. We can only reimburse for the training, but that employer contribution, you can add that to it. So we'll ask you for the projected employer contribution. And then at the end of training, we're going to ask for the actual, what did you spend? Because sometimes during the year you have less people on your training plan. So that kind of contributes that your contribution would be less at that point. So we just want to make sure that we have a projection at the beginning and an actual at the end. And then that you utilize Pure Michigan Talent Connect. Not a hard requirement, but we we want to make sure that the statewide job board that we use is the best that it can be. So we're going to ask that if you want us to even post the jobs that you have, if you have new hires, especially on your training plan, we're probably going to ask that question of you. Hey, you want me to do an ad for you? I can do an ad real quick, or are you doing that already? Those kinds of things. So just to make sure that you know that that's another job board for you that does work for you. Okay, almost done. Key takeaways. The training must lead to a credential. So if you're doing this training and it doesn't lead to a credential of some sort, we want to talk to you about that, because there has to be a credential at the end of these trainings. Online training must be live and instructor led. So you can do online training, but there has to be a component of it at least that is live and instructor led. A quality instructor led hybrid course that is both modularized and live is allowable. So if you're taking some courses that self-pace over here, but then you meet online with a live person, or you're able to ask that person questions and get some instruction from them, that counts. 100% online and self-paced training that meets USDOL registered apprenticeship program requirements is allowable. So even though on the other side, non-apprentices are not allowed to do the self-paced training, if you're part of an apprenticeship and it's part of their training plan or their RTI, related technical instruction, and you'll know those terms if you have an apprenticeship, then that's allowable. If it's good enough for that USDOL registered apprenticeship program, it's good enough for this grant. So even if it is online self-paced training. HR training for non-traditional registered apprenticeships that leads to college credit is allowed. Just like it says, it is allowed. WeBlooms is the online application system. That's the platform. Will display your score prior to submission as well as after modifications are made. So if you're filling out the application and you go down to the bottom, you can see how many points that you're being awarded. And we don't know what the cutoff for the award will be but we do know what it was last time, and we do know what it's been for the last 3 cycles. So we can get a pretty good idea, but we're not going to be able to give you like, this is the point total that you need. That won't come. And they're pretty tight-lipped about those things too. So, all right. MWA required to share the application with all partners engaged in the application process. So if you're working with like a local EDO, they'll see it. MMTC, like I said, is the one that I see us sharing anything with. And then, of course, reimbursement will take place after all training is completed. Oh, okay. And I promised we were almost done, and that is it. So here is our team and their phone numbers and emails. Like I said, we will send this out. But this is the time for any of those questions. And Tiffany has a question. If your 2023 award goes through mid-July of 2024, when does the 2024 award kick in? So typically what we're going to see, Tiffany, is if you applied in cycle 2 of 2023, is that what that says? I can't. My brain's hurting already.
I think that's what she's
Okay,
asking.
yeah,
So
okay,
yeah, if you were awarded it for FY23 cycle two, your training period was like July 26th through July 25th of this year. But now for FY24, supposedly the training period is supposed to start July 1st. So there will be like 3-ish weeks of overlap there.
yep,
But that is when the training period for FY24 cycle two would start is July 1st.
okay, good. Any other questions? I'll move this because,
I have a question.
yes,
Can you
bro,
hear me?
yes.
Okay, so this is our first time doing this. We have a young man in our kitchen who's gonna do a sous chef apprenticeship.
Okay.
So if we go through all of these steps and we do it, do we, Birchwood Farm, do we as the company pay up front for the education and then you guys reimburse us then when he fully completes it, or how does that work? Or do you guys pay us once we go through all these steps and then we can use that to pay for this apprenticeship?
Yeah, so the Going Pro Talent Fund in itself is a reimbursement-based program.
Okay,
And so we would reimburse you once the sous chef goes through the training. And he doesn't have to go through the entire apprenticeship program. It's like one class within that year's curriculum, basically. So once you get one of those certificates of completion, depending on what it is within that, and that's what the BSR will talk to you about details about, we could start that reimbursement process once we see that. And then they have to stay for the 90 days.
okay, okay.
All right. And it looks like we have some more questions here. I'm gonna,
Yeah, that first one, applying for cycle two and 24 and cycle one of 25. Um, I answered this a couple times at the in person, so I've got a banked answer. So technically, yes, you can apply for cycle one of 2025 or FY25 if you are awarded in cycle two of FY24, but your training period then is cut in half for the FY24 cycle two. You have to have your training done by the cycle one of FY24 deadline, which is December 31st. So we only had one employer last year that jumped from cycle two to back to cycle one, out of like 50 or 30 or so. So it's probably not it's probably a rare thing, but it is possible if you're going to get your training done quickly. You want me to just keep answering these, Rob?
go for it.
Okay, just going down the list. So Allison asked a couple, can you apply 2 successful years in a row? I'm guessing you mean like FY24 and FY25. Yes, every new grant year, this isn't a grant, but every new funding year, you can apply again. If you apply and are awarded in cycle one, you cannot apply in cycle two. But if you apply and are denied in cycle one, you can then apply in cycle two. And then, of course, I already talked about jumping from cycle two back to cycle one. And then she also asked about the funds being applied to training. Yes, it can only be applied to the training cost. It cannot be applied to any like the wages paid during training or anything like that. That all goes into employer contribution. There was one that came directly to me asking if we missed the May 10 deadline this year, when is the next deadline? So the next application period would be in the fall for FY25. We usually see that open in like October-ish. So it kind of varies every year depending on how far the state is behind on things. But yeah, we would see that normally around October. Amy's in the authorization form getting an error message. So you need to select if you type in the authorization request, if you type in your EIN or your company name, it should bring up one that like an autofill, and then you would select that. However, do not submit authorization requests now. It will not go through. Used to be we would deny those if they were sent in early because they can't be sent in early. I think somebody tried to do it the other day and they said it just denied them flat out. It didn't even let them submit it. So you don't need to waste your time. Once that opens on Monday, then you would be able to submit an authorization request. But it should just pop up like an autofill, and you should be able to select that. That's the list that it's referring to. When you use a community college course for college credit and the class is canceled and will not be rescheduled in time, do we lose just the funds for the course or all the funds for all the courses in our training plan? So if you don't complete or can't complete the college credit course that you put on your training plan, and then you're not able to replace it with another college credit course, then you would lose just the funds attached to that. So if it was one person at $2,000 reimbursement for the college course, we just would not be able to reimburse that 2,000. You would still be eligible for the rest of your award as the rules stand right now.
I'm assuming that means there's no more questions in the chat.
Yeah, that was all the ones in the chat. So if anyone wants to like turn on their mic and ask a question, go ahead.
Yeah. And I will reiterate, the team that we have, and the amount of applications that come in, we are still willing to come out to you. We're willing to do virtual calls. We're willing to have you come to one of our centers to help. This is a grant that we know is a great opportunity for so many people, businesses and individuals. So please do reach out to us. It might take us 1 or 2 days, especially during this busy time, but we will get back to you. All right. I know that I am a fast talker, so I gave you back, oh my gosh, almost that full hour, which is great. But if you guys have any questions, I'm going back to the points for the scoring criteria here, just so you guys can see that again. But if there's anything else out there.
Also, if you haven't already, can you put your name, your company name, and your email address in the chat? I think there was a few of you I tried to message directly, just because I want to make sure we send you the slide deck and the training plan template after this. So if you could do that, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, and even though that application or authorization request isn't open yet for anybody, that does not stop you from getting in contact with us or starting your training plan. The biggest thing that you're going to do to make yourself successful in this is to be prepared. We've talked to many, many companies already. One of the major themes that I'm seeing in those conversations is I can project out. I don't know every training because I need to get my leadership on board, or we need to talk about this as a leadership team within the organization before we do anything. So don't wait, because that application window is shorter than we think. May 10th will be here before we know it, to do those things. I do recommend another tip that Rob Best has taught me, is to lean into this first one if this is your first one, and don't try to overdo it for yourself. Starting small and becoming an expert at this is great, because there are 2 cycles a year, and this has been 10 years now that this is a bipartisan supported program from the state. And we went from the beginning, I think there was $6 million committed in the first year, and we're up to $50 million being committed for each year. And each cycle is almost like last cycle was 40 million. So there's lots of money out there for us to take advantage of when it comes to this. So if you start small this year, then you can start building up, adding apprentices, for instance, making sure that you project a good amount of new hires. If you know that number, these are all good strategies to have. All right. Just waiting that awkward amount of time before we say any other questions at all. Is there anybody on the business services team that thinks that there's something else we have to say?
I'll just reiterate what Rob said and say, if you plan on applying, start your training plan as soon as possible. So I know that this opens on Monday, so we're kind of down to go time, but the sooner you get that training plan in, the sooner that we can get you onto the application stage. So and then if you are curious about whether or not, you'll be competitive applying, contact myself or your BSR, and we can talk to you about, and walk you through the scoring and see kind of estimate where you're gonna land and see, how viable your application would be. That's all I got though.
All right. Well, with that, we're gonna give you back, 50 minutes of your day. And the sun's coming out in my area, so let's see if we can enjoy some of that. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.